Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
I have a riddle for all of you. What is all-natural, 99% lactose-free, gluten-free, and contains 12 probiotic cultures? If you were just thinking Lifeway Kefir in your head, then you've either listened to this podcast before and heard me rave about it, or you're already familiar with how great Lifeway Kefir is. Not only am I addicted to these little cultured dairy drinks, but they're constantly releasing new products, including their line of Perfect 12 Kefir. Perfect 12 Kefir has all the flavor you've grown to love with Lifeway Kefir, with no added sugar. It's made with stevia leaf extract, an all-natural, no-calorie sweetener. Each sip has that satisfying burst of flavor, but without all the guilt. As usual, I'm sipping on one right now as I record. The key lime pie flavor, which is pretty yummy if I do say so myself. Go to lifewaykefir.com/courtjunkie for a coupon. That's Lifeway, KEFIR.com/courtjunkie. Hey everyone, this is Jillian, and you are listening to episode 22 of the Court Junkie podcast. Today's episode follows an ambush, a manhunt, and a capital murder case. But before we get started, I want to say a quick thank you for your support. Please make sure to hit the little subscribe button so you can immediately get access to new episodes when they come out. And please consider joining my Facebook discussion group by going to courtjunkie.com/Facebook. You can also find me on Twitter at courtjunkiepod, on Instagram at courtjunkie, or you can email me at podcast@courtjunkie.com. Now, on to the show. At approximately 10:45 p.m. on September 12th, 2014, State Police Dispatcher Nicole Palmer arrived early for her shift at the Blooming Grove Barracks in Pike County, Pennsylvania. She was scheduled to work from 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. She walked inside, and when she got to the lobby, she passed Corporal Brian Dixon on his way out. It was the end of his shift, and he was going home to his wife and 2 kids. She went to the communication room, as she always did, and within minutes, she received her first phone call of the night. A Pike County resident was upset about his neighbor shooting off firearms in his yard. Pike County, Pennsylvania spans a total of about 567 square miles, or 1,470 square kilometers. The terrain is rough, yet beautiful. It rises from the river valley in the east to the foothills of the Pocono Mountains in the west. The Blooming Grove Barracks are surrounded by dense forest on all sides. It's located right off Route 402, the north-south state route that runs through Pike and Monroe counties. While Nicole Palmer was on that phone call, she suddenly heard a loud bang coming from outside the barracks. She looked out the window to the lobby, and just outside the front door, she could see Corporal Dixon lying on the ground. She went out into the lobby and opened the door to the outside. Corporal Dixon was lying there, motionless. She asked him what happened, and she could tell that he was having a hard time trying to speak. Just then, another loud bang. Another shot was fired, and Nicole could see a cloud of white residue on the floor of the lobby. She closed the door and ran back inside, screaming for help. She was in a panic. As she was deciding what to do, she ran back outside. Corporal Dixon mouthed, "Help me," and asked her to bring him into safety, but she wasn't able to. She ran back inside and called 911. Meanwhile, Trooper Alex Douglas had been in the parking lot when the shots rang out. He had carpooled to work that day with several other troopers, and he had gone to his personal vehicle to drop off his gym bag before heading into work. He and another friend had plans to go running after their shift was over. He was on the phone with his girlfriend, letting her know that he had just gotten to work, when he heard a loud bang, followed by a scream. He was hanging up with his girlfriend when he heard yet another loud bang. He noticed someone lying on the ground, just outside the entrance to the barracks, so he walked up the steps to see what was going on. As he got closer, he saw Nicole Palmer open the door, look down at the person on the ground, and then quickly go back inside the building. She didn't see him approaching. Trooper Douglas drew his firearm, and as he approached the person on the ground, he saw that it was Corporal Dixon and that he was lying face up in a pool of blood. He realized that the loud bangs he had heard earlier had been gunshots, and the scream had been Corporal Dixon. He ran over to the police dispatch office window and banged on it, yelling for them to call 911, that Dixon had been shot. He then ran over to Dixon and reached down to grab his foot so he could pull him through the front entrance. But then, a bullet hit him too, going through both of his hips and immediately sending him crashing to the ground. Using all the strength he could muster, he opened one of the entrance doors that had been shot out and shattered and got into the building. He collapsed on the floor of the lobby, bleeding and yelling to call for help. Another trooper came out into the lobby, and Douglas yelled, "Don't come out! Someone's shooting at us from across the road." As he lay there, more troopers emerged into the lobby and dragged Douglas to safety behind a secure door. Another trooper provided cover, training his rifle towards the lobby door as they dragged him. The troopers were in panic mode. They had no idea who was shooting at them or how many shooters there were, let alone where they were. They were under attack.
Blooming Grove Township 434, Route 402 at the Blooming Grove State Barracks. Code 17G. 2 victims at this time. They responded 2300. Shooting in the parking lot of the barracks. Request a stage away at this time. On the line with the state police. They want you, an ambulance and medic, respond into the scene. You're going to be going to the garage area if you're familiar. They're unsure if the actor is still on scene at this time. The front until we figure out if the actor is still on scene. We're requesting 402 at Route 6 and 84 to be closed down this time. Route 6 and 402 for road closure. Nobody is to go down south of 402.
The troopers needed to figure out how to get Corporal Dixon inside the building to safety. They devised a plan to use a state police SUV as a shield to block the sniper's shots so they could get to Dixon and then carry him inside. They put shields in the vehicle's windows and drove it around to the front of the building. They parked it in front of where Dixon was lying, and they picked him up and carried him inside, through the lobby and behind the secure door. By this time, Dixon was in bad shape. They tried to revive him until the ambulance showed up, but it was too late. Corporal Dixon died at the scene. Trooper Douglas was airlifted to the hospital. While the Blooming Grove Barracks went on lockdown and rescue attempts were made, 31-year-old Eric Frein was running through the forest, trying to make it to his car. He had no idea if anyone was behind him. He just knew he had to keep going. Eric Matthew Frein was born on May 3rd, 1983, and he lived in Canadensis in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, with his parents. His father was a microbiologist and retired major in the United States Army, having served 28 years. Eric was a military enthusiast who at one time was part of a group that would reenact battles from Cold War-era Eastern Europe. But now, Eric Frein had just launched an attack on the Blooming Grove Barracks, and he was now on the run. He made it to his Jeep, which he had parked not far from the barracks, but as he was driving away, he ran into a roadblock about a half-mile away. He quickly turned the Jeep around and tried to pull onto an unfinished access road, but he ended up getting stuck in a retention pond, and the Jeep wouldn't budge. He would have to ditch it. As police investigated the scene, set up their perimeter, and tried to come up with possible suspects, one man immediately rose to the top of their suspect list: Jeffrey Hudak, a man who was rumored to have a grudge against Trooper Douglas, as Douglas was reportedly dating Hudak's estranged wife. On September 13th, just one day after the attack, troopers showed up at Hudak's mother's home and took him into custody at gunpoint, handcuffs and all. They held him for 12 hours while they intensely questioned him, before realizing that Jeffrey Hudak was not their man. 3 days went by with no solid leads in the case. Funeral arrangements were being made for Corporal Dixon, and Trooper Douglas had undergone emergency surgery, but wasn't out of the woods just yet. He was in a medically induced coma and hooked up to a ventilator. James Novak, a Pike County resident who lived just 2 miles away from the barracks, was frustrated by the lack of leads in the case, and he wanted to do something to help. He decided to go for a walk, and just a few hundred yards away from his home, he came across a Jeep Cherokee, partially submerged in a swampy retention pond. He opened the rear door to the vehicle and saw a gun case inside. He then left the Jeep and ran back to his home to call 911. This would be the first major break in the case. When police searched the vehicle, the registration came back to E. Michael and Deborah Frein. Inside, they found 2 spent cartridge casings, a valid Pennsylvania driver's license, Social Security card, and a Pennsylvania Game Commission range permit for an Eric Matthew Frein. They also found water bottles, multiple cigarette butts, and a sweatshirt. They executed a search warrant on the home address listed for Eric Frein in Canadensis, Pennsylvania. Eric's father told police that there were 2 firearms missing from the residence, an AK-47 and a .308 rifle with a scope. He said that he had trained Eric how to shoot and that Eric was a better shooter than he was, saying that he doesn't miss. Eric's mother, Deborah Frein, told police that the car they found was indeed Eric's, that he had been using it for the last 2 years. A warrant was issued for Eric Frein's arrest. He was charged with murder and attempted murder, among other charges. A $100,000 reward was offered for information leading to his capture, and he was placed on the FBI Most Wanted list with bold capital letters that read, "Should be considered armed and dangerous." Police now knew who their suspect was. The question was, when and how would they catch him? On September 18th, 6 days after the attack, police were able to determine that Eric had used his cell phone to call his parents at approximately 2 p.m. in Price Township, Monroe County, about 3 miles from his home. A search of the area led officers to a campsite where they found a brand new checkbook with Eric's name on it, along with the cell phone. There was also clothing, food, water bottles, and a 30-gallon bag of garbage that contained handwritten notes. It looked like a diary of sorts, and it documented the attack. Dated Friday, September 12th, the first note said, "Got a shot around 11 p.m. and took it. he dropped. I was surprised at how quick. I took a follow-up shot on his head, neck area. He was still and quiet after. Another cop approached the one I just shot. As he went to kneel, I took a shot at him and jumped in the door. His leg was visible and still. I ran back to the Jeep. I made maybe a half mile from the GL road and hit a roadblock. I didn't expect one so soon. It was only 15 to 20 minutes. I did a K-turn a quarter mile from them and pulled into a development I knew had unfinished access road. Hearing helicopters, I just used my marker lights, missed the trail around a runoff pool, and drove straight into it. Disaster. Made half attempt to stash AK and ran. As the days went by, more tips and more sightings started to pour in. People reported seeing someone matching Eric's description within 5 miles of his home, but Eric seemed to always be one step ahead of the manhunt. They would find things that he had discarded, like empty packs of Serbian cigarettes, his favorite, a sure sign that he had been where they were. Over the scanner, authorities put out an advisory that lethal force was authorized for the safety of their officers.
Bravo 1 to perimeter units and respondent units. Be advised, lethal force is authorized for protection of self and others if positive ID is made and subject refuses to surrender. I will repeat, per PSP command, lethal force is authorized for protection of self and others if positive ID is made and subject refuses to surrender.
And while members from all types of law enforcement, including the U.S. Marshals, the FBI, Homeland Security, and Customs and Border Patrol, were methodically searching for him, the media reported more on who Eric Frein was, and even more concerning, the fact that police believed that he had been planning this attack and his escape for more than 2 years. On September 24th, authorities gave a press conference with an update on their search.
We're here this afternoon to talk a little more about the continuing investigation into the shooting incident at the Blooming Grove station, where 2 Pennsylvania State Police troopers were ambushed by Eric Matthew Frein. I want to first thank the community and the residents in the Pike and Monroe County areas for their cooperation and continued support of our operation. Based on our investigation, our search efforts continue to be focused around the Pike-Monroe County border, more specifically the Barrett and Price Township areas. As I have previously indicated, we believe that Frein has prepared and planned extensively for months or maybe years for this attack and his efforts to avoid apprehension. We continue to canvass the neighborhoods in Barrett and Price Townships for useful pieces of information and are asking anyone who has information which might be useful to law enforcement to contact our tip line. Specifically, we're requesting information on any vacant or seasonal homes in the area which may have been disturbed in some way. And by that I mean unlocked sheds, garage doors that aren't closed completely or seem to be ajar, pet doors that are obviously not locked, broken or open windows, those types of things that would be apparent to someone living in the neighborhood and again might give us some indication that an individual could have gained entry into a structure.
On September 29th, a tip came in that Eric had been spotted in a heavily wooded area near the border of Pike and Monroe counties in the Price Township woods. The FBI SWAT team found a remote campsite that looked as though it had been abruptly abandoned. The site had been concealed under a camouflage tarp, but there was a blue plaid pillow that gave its location away. They found clothing and hygiene items, and a camouflage bag and backpack. Inside the backpack was a scary discovery: 2 IEDs, or improvised explosive devices. Authorities had to evacuate the area while a bomb squad was brought in. They safely removed the IEDs and determined that they weren't dangerous. Also at the campsite was a handwritten journal that detailed life on the run that looked as though Eric had written it. Then, finally, on October 30th, 2014, 48 days after the attack, the manhunt was over. As U.S. Marshals were searching the Birchwood Pocono Air Park in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, they saw him. The area contained a non-operational airport, which housed a single runway and an airplane hangar. At about 4:30 p.m., U.S. Marshals spotted a male matching Eric's description, walking through the air park. One of the marshals, with his rifle aimed at the man, quickly approached him, yelling, "Police, U.S. Marshals, get on the ground." The man complied and got on the ground, his arms stretched out by his sides. The marshal asked him his name, and the man said, "Eric Frein." The marshal then put his foot on the back of Eric's head and applied just enough pressure to keep him there, while another marshal handcuffed him. He was handcuffed with not just any handcuffs. They were Corporal Brian Dixon's handcuffs.
Tonight at 6 p.m., fugitive Eric Frein was captured. And now, as you know, he will face justice here in Pike County. We have stated that early on that we would not rest until his capture was made. And I am so pleased to be able to say that tonight we have made that major step that has to be taken down the path to justice. To the family of Trooper Dixon, to the family of Trooper Douglas, and to Trooper Douglas, let me assure you from everybody here, justice will be served.
Eric's trial began on April 4th, 2017, in front of Judge Gregory Shalak. For the prosecution, there was Pike County District Attorney Ray Tonkin and First Assistant DA Bruce DeSaro, and for the defense, Michael Weinstein and William Russo. There were concerns that Eric wouldn't get a fair trial with a jury chosen from Pike County, which only had a population of about 56,000. So the jury was chosen from Westchester, about 140 miles away from the Blooming Grove Barracks. By the time of his trial, Eric's appearance was different than the rugged look he had been sporting at the time of his capture, after 48 days on the run. He was now wearing a suit coat, had a haircut, and was wearing glasses. He was facing charges of first-degree murder of a law enforcement officer, attempted first-degree murder of a law enforcement officer, assaulting a law enforcement officer, terrorism in efforts to influence government policy by intimidation or coercion, terrorism in efforts to affect government conduct, and lawfully having or making weapons of mass destruction, firing a gun into an occupied structure, and having an instrument of crime with intent and reckless endangerment. He was pleading not guilty to all of them. If convicted, Eric would be facing the death penalty. In his opening statement, Assistant DA Bruce DeSaro detailed the events of the attack on September 12, 2014. He said Eric Frein slithered through the underbrush in the dark of night, concealed himself in the woods across the street from the Blooming Grove Barracks, and began shooting during the late-night shift change. He recounted how Corporal Dixon was shot through the chest. The bullet went through the front and back of his vest and then into the lobby of the barracks. He said, "Right then and right there, Corporal Dixon's service and his watch on behalf of all of us came to an end." He said .308 caliber ammunition was used. The first shot hit Dixon, the second shot hit a tree, and the third shot struck Dixon again. He then told the jury how Trooper Alex Douglas was shot as he was trying to help Corporal Dixon. He said a bullet went in one side of his hips and exited the other side. It then hit the door in the lobby of the barracks. DeSaro said that immediately after the shooting, Eric Frein fled the area, but didn't get very far since his car got stuck. So then he fled on foot. The next day, police found 4 shell casings in the woods across the street from the barracks. And then 3 days later, a resident found the stuck Jeep which was registered to Eric's parents and had Eric's driver's license and social security card inside. He said Eric Frein was the subject of a massive manhunt by scores of local, state, and federal law enforcement authorities. He said police searched his parents' home 15 miles south of the barracks and found weapons, bomb-making materials, and to-do lists. He told the jury how they had tracked Eric's cell phone to an area of the woods where they found a campsite with ammunition, Eric's checkbook, and handwritten notes that described the attack. He recounted how Eric had finally been captured after 48 days on the run at an abandoned airport hangar 22 miles from the barracks. He said police found the rifle that was used in the attack with Eric's DNA on it. DeSarl told the court that the forensic evidence they have in the case includes DNA from the Jeep and the campsite, website searches, and a thumb drive with a letter, presumably to Eric's parents, that talks about sparking a revolution. He said some of their witnesses will include experts who will testify about the ballistics on the shell casings and the handwriting on the notes. He showed the jury crumpled up notebook pages that police had found during the manhunt, written in Eric's handwriting, that describes how he got a shot around 11 p.m. and took it. He also showed them portions of the letter that Eric wrote to his parents. "Our nation is far from what it was and what it should be," the letter said. "There is so much wrong, and on so many levels, only passing through the crucible of another revolution can get us back the liberties we once had. Tension is high at the moment, and the time seems right for a spark to ignite a fire in the hearts of men." DeSarl said after his capture, Eric talked to police and made self-serving statements. He said the state was seeking a verdict that provides nothing less, and I mean nothing less, than full justice. And as he said this, the words were spelled out in giant blue letters on a TV screen. Defense attorney Michael Weinstein's opening statement was only about 7 minutes long. He said that what happened was a tragedy of monumental proportions. He said there was no question that one very good man was killed, another one was injured, and a woman who was just doing her job was endangered. He told the jury to remember that there are 3 pillars of justice: presumed innocence, burden of proof, and reasonable doubt. He said Eric is presumed innocent and that the government must prove its case. He then said that Eric had an absolute right not to testify and that he won't testify, but the jury will still get to hear from him, he said, in a candid police interview. With that interview, he said they'll get to meet him and see what he's like and what his life was like. Nicole Palmer, the dispatcher who narrowly escaped being shot herself, was the first witness to take the stand. She described to the jury how she had just come in for the late-night shift and was taking her first phone call of the day when she heard a gunshot. That phone call was played in the courtroom. There was a sharp crack, followed by a muffled one. Nicole told the caller to hang on a moment as she went to see what happened. Nicole testified that she saw Corporal Dixon lying on the ground just outside the door. She said she ran over to the front door, opened it, and saw him lying on his back. She said she asked him what happened, and he mouthed, "Help me." She said, "He was pale. When he was trying to speak, all I heard was the blood in his throat." She said she then went back inside and screamed for help. She went outside again and said that Corporal Dixon was trying to tell her that he had been shot and to drag him inside. She said she told him that she couldn't, and then went back into the lobby to protect herself. She said she was afraid for her life. She called for help and requested backup from other neighboring barracks, while warning them about the sniper. She said she also called her mom to let her know that she was okay. She testified that one of the troopers told her that she looked pale and recommended that she sit down, but she was worried that she'd fall apart if she didn't keep busy. Corporal Warren Graber testified and walked the jury through a series of surveillance videos that showed the shooting and the chaos afterwards. On the projection screen, prosecutors put up an image of Corporal Dixon in the arms of 3 fellow officers as they tried to carry him to safety. They then showed another image of Dixon lying dead on his back with a bullet hole in his chest and blood in his mouth and on the left side of his face. They also showed surveillance footage of Trooper Douglas as he managed to crawl through the lobby, blood oozing from his wound. 2 troopers then opened the door from the barracks to the lobby, and one of them dragged him into the room, while the other trained his rifle on the lobby door in order to provide cover. Additional surveillance showed troopers using that police SUV as a cover so they could bring Corporal Dixon inside. Eric's attorney, Michael Weinstein, didn't cross-examine either witness, something that would become a pattern throughout the trial, as he would only cross-examine a select few by the time the trial was over. Emergency responders testified about the chaos they encountered when they arrived at the scene. Fire Chief Mike Miller said that it was chaotic because no one knew whether the gunfire they heard was cover fire or coming from the shooter. He said he assisted in getting Trooper Douglas to the medical helicopter and that night still haunts him. He said he hopes that it will all be over after the trial. He said, "It was very stressful. It was a couple years ago, and though you cannot put everything out of your mind, you go through and you try to get it as far back as possible. Having to go through this again brought everything back to life again." Trooper after trooper took the stand to detail for the jury the horror from that night. Robert Golden said that he had carpooled to work with Trooper Douglas and 2 other officers. He said he went inside the barracks and another trooper approached him shortly after and was frantic, saying that Dixon and Douglas had been shot. He said he and a few other troopers, including Dixon, were Marine veterans and that they had been trained in defensive and offensive measures to use in sniper attacks. He said a sniper will shoot one person to draw in others. He said your first reaction is to save your comrade, but that you first have to ID the location of the shooter and then develop a plan to get the victim out. He said they knew they had to get Dixon inside fast, or he was going to bleed out. He described their rescue attempt, using the SUV as a shield so they could get Dixon inside. He said once Dixon was inside the barracks, he started CPR on him. He said he was slapping him on the face, saying, "Dixon, are you there?" He said he was looking into his eyes, but that there was nothing there. They ripped off his vest and shirt and saw the bullet hole in his chest. They took turns doing CPR. He said he went around shutting all the blinds so that no one could see inside. They didn't know how many shooters there were. Golden said he told another trooper to guard the stairwell and told him, "If anyone comes up the steps, challenge him. If he's not one of us, shoot him." He said Trooper Douglas, meanwhile, was in shock, and Golden told him that he was going to be okay. He said when EMTs arrived, they tried reviving Dixon, but they didn't work on him for very long. Golden said he knew that he was dead. He testified that he wanted to cover Dixon's body with an American flag because it would have been a more appropriate honor, but instead had to settle for a blanket. He said he accompanied Dixon's body first to a command post that had been set up at a nearby church, and then to the coroner's office, then to where the autopsy would take place, and then finally to a funeral home. He said he finally left him at the funeral home, telling the jury, "As a Marine, you don't leave a body unattended." Trooper Brian Seymour said he too was in that carpool with Trooper Douglas, and that when he heard that Dixon and Douglas had been shot, he was in disbelief. He said he flew in the helicopter with Douglas and held his hand as he was airlifted to the hospital. On the 3rd day of the trial came an announcement that the trial would be delayed after Eric was taken to the hospital at about 8 a.m. after reportedly falling and hitting his head while brushing his teeth. The trial resumed later that afternoon, with Eric back in court, no visible injuries, although he reportedly appeared to nod off a couple times. James Novak, the Pike County resident who found Eric Frein's car, testified. He recalled how he went for a walk and how just a few hundred yards from his home, he came across a Jeep Cherokee, partially submerged in a swampy retention pond. He said he saw a gun case inside and then left the vehicle, ran home, and called 911. He received a $22,000 reward check from Pennsylvania Crime Stoppers, since the find of the Jeep kicked off the manhunt for Eric. Corporal Jeremy Carroll testified that he responded to the retention pond where the Jeep was, and he called in more troopers to secure the scene. He said that when they searched the vehicle, they found camouflage face paint, a flashlight, a pack of cigarettes, a wallet, and a driver's license and social security card with the name Eric Frein. They also found 2 bullet casings that matched the 4 casings found at the barracks. Eric's father, Eugene Frein, also took the stand and told the jury that his son had a room in their home, but that he had actually moved out in July, about 2 months before the attack. He said he would visit with his parents on weekends, and the last time he saw Eric prior to the attack was 3 days before, when Eric came by the house to pick up a pair of hiking boots. He said Eric is an above-average marksman and confirmed that the Jeep police found partially submerged in the swampy retention pond appeared to be the same one that Eric had been driving around the time of the shootings. Various troopers testified about what was recovered from Eric's bedroom, as well as from a campsite area in the woods where Eric's cell phone had pinged. From his bedroom, they found a United States Army manual called Sniper Training and Employment, along with hundreds of rounds of ammunition, which had the same markings as the shell casings recovered from the scene of the attack. Special Agent Matthew Fontaine testified about finding Eric's camouflaged campsite on September 29, 2014, in the Price Township woods. He said, the camp's location and positioning indicated that it had been set up by somebody who wanted the advantage of being undetected by anyone approaching. He said the SWAT team spotted an unconcealed blue plaid pillow that led to the discovery of the campsite. He recounted how they recovered a cell phone, a brand new checkbook with Eric's name and address on it, a full 30-gallon garbage bag filled with garbage, clothes, hygiene items, and a camouflage bag and backpack. He said they also recovered 3 pieces of moldy, crumpled-up paper that appeared to be parts of a journal written by Eric that talked about the attack. State Police investigator Sean Duran told the jury how they found 2 IEDs and that one of the devices had a fuse, and both had hardware nuts glued to them, meant to act as shrapnel that would fly out and tear into the skin of anybody who was in the area when they went off. Duran said they evacuated the campsite and the bomb squad had to be called before they determined that they were not dangerous. On cross-examination, Eric's attorney, Michael Weinstein, established that the FBI SWAT team did not take photos of the campsite when they first discovered it. Duran testified that the priority at the time was the safety of the officers in the area. Weinstein also implied that the campsite wasn't very concealed and that perhaps whoever had been there had wanted authorities to find it. Major George Bivens testified about the manhunt for Eric, saying that it was like finding a proverbial needle in a haystack. He said over 1,000 officers participated in the search on foot, and that it spanned more than 300 square miles, or 777 square kilometers. He said the terrain was rough in the Pocono Mountains, and that the search was slow because they were dealing with a sniper and bombs. They had to clear cabins and abandon homes. It wasn't a matter of just sending officers in for a quick look around, Bivens said. We had to tactily, methodically make sure that each building was clear of any danger, which took time. He said the community was on high alert, that residents kept to themselves and police cars and armored vehicles patrolled the neighborhoods. The local schools changed up their bus routes, and parents took their children through police lines just to get them on their bus or to drive them to school. We'll get to more testimony in this trial right after this quick break. I love to read, but if you're anything like me, sometimes you just don't always have the time to pick up a book and read it from cover to cover. So instead, I like to use Audible, so I can listen to those books that I've been meaning to read while I'm on the go. And if trials are your thing, check out The Life and Trial of Lizzie Borden, the history of 19th century America's most famous murder case by Charles River Editors. And guess what? Audible has the Great Listen Guarantee, so if you decide you don't like the book you chose, no worries. You can exchange any book you aren't happy with for another one, at any time, no questions asked. The weather's getting nicer, so go enjoy a walk in the park and a twist in the plot. You can't make more time, but you can make the most of it. Turn your commute, chores, walk, travel, workout into something more with a free trial at Audible. Go to audible.com/courtjunkie to start now. That's audible.com/courtjunkie. Mother's Day is almost here. And have you gotten the mother figure in your life anything yet? I'm not going to say for sure that I'm ordering my mom flowers because, well, she listens to this podcast. But let's just say that if I do decide to get her flowers, I'm going with Pro Flowers. Pro Flowers has a really awesome deal for this Mother's Day on a bouquet that is bound to make an impression. Their 100 Blooms for Mom bouquet comes with a free glass vase for just $19.99, plus shipping and handling, which, if you've ever purchased flowers before, then you know how good of a deal this is. And if you really want to spoil her, you can upgrade to a premium vase and include gourmet chocolates for just $10 more. You can choose the delivery date you want, and Pro Flowers are guaranteed to arrive fresh and beautiful and stay that way for at least 7 days or your money back. That's a pretty long life for a bouquet of flowers. My fiancé just sent me a bouquet from Pro Flowers last week, and we're going on day 6, and they still look fantastic. The only way to get 100 Blooms for Mom with a free glass vase starting at $19.99 is to visit proflowers.com. Make sure to click on the microphone in the top right corner and use my code CourtJunkie. That's proflowers.com and code CourtJunkie when you click on the mic. This stunning bouquet sells out fast, so make sure to order today. And now, back to the trial. 2 U.S. Marshals, Scott Malkowski and John Schaaf, testified about Eric's capture on October 30th, 2014. They said they decided to do a search of an abandoned airfield on the Birchwood Resort property. Teams searched the buildings on the property and then started their search of the airfield. Malkowski said he saw movement in the high grass of the airfield and saw a black hat and then a face come into view. He said he waited until he could see the man's hands to make sure that he wasn't carrying anything. He testified that he aimed his rifle at the man and approached him, yelling for him to get on the ground. He said the man told him that his name was Eric Frein. They searched him and found a pocket knife and a cord holding up his inner and outer pants. Schaaf said it was obvious that Eric had been staying in the hangar, and so they asked if there were any explosives in there. He said Eric asked if they considered gunpowder or ammunition as explosives, and said that he had 2 rifles in the upstairs area of the hangar and a loaded pistol downstairs. Schaaf said Eric told him that he was concerned that kids may possibly find his loaded guns. The jury also heard from Eric Frein himself, from a 3-hour videotaped interview he did with police shortly after his capture. The interview took place in the Blooming Grove Barracks, the same site of the attack. The defense had fought to keep the interview out, saying that although Eric was read his Miranda rights, he never signed the waiver form, which the defense said meant that he never technically agreed to speak to police without an attorney present. They said he also clearly stated in the interview that he wasn't going to discuss any crimes, which would make any statements he did give inadmissible. They also said that police manipulated and coerced Eric into talking by giving him cigarettes and coffee and even joking around with him and making small talk. They said officers even kept complimenting him and told him that his parents had raised a well-mannered, well-spoken, and intelligent young man. They told him to do the right thing and tell them what happened for Corporal Dixon's family and for Trooper Douglas. The judge sided with the prosecution and said that Eric should have kept quiet if he didn't want to talk, but instead, he did talk. When he was first brought into the interrogation room, officers tended to his facial injuries and took off his shackles and handcuffs. Eric did tell police that he wouldn't discuss any crimes, but he said he didn't want any children to come across one of his loaded rifles, so he told the police where it was, buried in a case 2 to 3 feet underground in the woods. At one point later in the interview, Corporal Ben Clark tells him that he doesn't want what happened to Corporal Dixon to happen to him, saying, "I have children. I need to know if there's anyone else out there posing a threat to law enforcement or the public in general. I need to know if anyone else acted with you." Eric asked, "How can I convince you?" Clark responded, "Look me in the eye and tell me that you did this and that nobody else did." Eric looked directly at him and said, "I did this and nobody else did." He was asked if the first 2 shots hit Corporal Dixon, and Eric said yes. They asked him if he heard Dixon say anything after he was shot, and Eric replied, "He just yelled." They asked him if Trooper Douglas was hit by another shot, and Eric said yes. Eric started crying at different points in the interview, saying that a father would now never be going home to his children again, presumably talking about Corporal Dixon. When asked if he felt any regret, Eric nodded. Corporal Ben Clark told him, "This Eric Frein sitting in front of me can't be the same Eric Frein who waited an hour in the woods to shoot at state troopers. It just doesn't add up. Please help us understand what drove you to do this." Trooper Michael Mulvey asked him, "Was it something the police did to you in the past? Or is it how we do our jobs? Please tell us so we can do our jobs better. You have a chance to have some good come out of this. You can prevent anyone else from going through what you've been through so that they don't make the same mistake you have." Eric's reasons didn't give any insight into a motive, however. He talked about how the Constitution was no longer respected, and then talked about how he was depressed because he was still living with his parents as an adult and looking for a job. Eric was asked if being on the run and hunted for 48 days had been horrifying. He said, "I wouldn't say horrifying. It was scary, a little disconcerting." And when asked what he would tell Corporal Dixon's family and Trooper Douglas, he said, "I'm sorry." Troopers testified that when they searched the hangar, they found bedding, clothes, food, hygiene items, 2 rifles with loaded rifle magazines, a rifle scope, a loaded pistol, ammunition, a laptop computer, and what appeared to be a journal detailing his activities while on the run. The following are excerpts from the journal entries. From Saturday, September 13th, 2014. Had to run, Jeep stuck. Went on foot, heading southwest to stream under 84. Made it to Little Egypt Road. Got lost in development. Continued south. Crossed a deep stream. Headed to Powerline Trail, up to 84. Too much activity. From Sunday, September 14th. Slept all day in abandoned camper. Crossed 84. No activity. Started campfire. From September 15th through the 21st. Started campfire. Slept well for the first time in 3 days. Went deeper. Set up shelter and cleaned up. Phoned home twice to let them know I'm still alive. Got text saying that I'm a suspect. Saw patrol. Not spotted. They stuck to the trails. Listened to radio. News media calling me a survivalist. Ha. Catchy phrase, I guess. Shelter in place by spooked cops. Shelter in place lifted. From September 22nd through the 27th. Crossed Broadhead right under the helicopters. Changed out of wet clothes. Waited for clothes and boots to dry. Took bath. slept like a human, got buckets for catching rainwater, listened to radio, classical made me cry, shaved and did laundry, searched Buck Hill Inn. Noisy kids were in the front room for a few minutes, then left. From September 29th, still 5 Mile Zone, bathed and cleaned rifle and pistol. From September 30th, fasted all day. They found stashed pipe bombs. That's not the case, but it should slow him down. From October 1st through the 9th, snooper came by, helicopters close, travel after dark, hunting closed. 2 cops fell from tree stand and flown to hospital. That's what those helicopters must have been. No respite. Recon went well. This massive search can't last forever. Slept in morning, plugged in laptop, searching 1 Mile Zone in Mill Creek area, bathed and tried fasting, did laundry, got piece of chocolate. From October 11th through the 21st. Have lasted longer than I expected to last. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, a sinner. Bathed, Columbus Day. No news. Spigot shut off. How to get water? Barrett Township trick-or-treat and Halloween parade canceled. State senator coming to investigate. Bathed and did laundry. Read news on internet. Mostly BS. Cops seem to be chasing bears they think are me. Been hearing coyotes or coy dogs. We'll try to get food tomorrow night. Likely get caught. Only beans left. Search is around Swiftwater. False sighting near Swiftwater. From October 25th through the 27th. Found 2 packages of crackers. Broke into a place. Was careful not to damage anything. Took rice, ramen, and oil. Lord have mercy. Christ have mercy. And then the last entry on October 28th through the 29th. 10-mile hike. Have no tools to break in without smashing glass. Eric was then captured that next day. An FBI chemist and forensic examiner, David McCollum, testified that bomb-making materials had been taken from Eric's home, including plastic pill bottles, tripwire, spools, and musket caps that contained high-energy explosive materials. Another FBI explosives devices examiner said that the FBI reconstructed the bombs using materials similar to what had been found in Eric's home. They were then detonated under controlled conditions to show the damage that they could cause. A latent fingerprint that matched Eric's was found on a piece of tape that had been used on one of the bomb materials. A state police handwriting expert, along with a U.S. Secret Service document analysis expert, testified about the notes and the journal that troopers had found. They said that the handwriting in the notes and the journal were compared to samples of Eric's handwriting and were determined to be a match. Dr. Mohammed Siddiqui, Trooper Douglas's lead doctor, testified about the injuries Douglas had suffered and the efforts done to save him. He said Douglas was rushed to the Community Medical Center Trauma Unit in Scranton. He had been shot through both hips and was suffering from bleeding that was damaging his internal organs and expanding his abdomen. He said doctors had to cut open his abdomen to try and stop the bleeding so that they could stabilize his heart rate and blood pressure. He said they removed parts of his pelvic bone that had shattered, as well as parts of his rectum and small intestine. They inserted a colostomy bag and patched blood vessel leakage. He said Douglas had undergone 18 surgeries and would likely have to have more. According to a state police computer forensic investigator, in November 2012, a little less than 2 years before the attack, Eric had conducted web searches for ballistics and trajectory calculations. Then, in May 2013, over a year prior to the attack, he looked up information online about how manhunts are conducted, how to escape manhunts, police manhunt procedures, and a police manhunt guide. Police examined a computer from Eric's parents' home, as well as a computer found in the hangar where Eric was captured. The day after the shootings, on September 13th, 2014, Eric searched for information online about whether cell phones could be tracked when their batteries are removed. While he was on the run, he also looked up news reports about the manhunt and about the trooper who was killed. The investigator said a letter to Eric's parents was also found on a computer thumb drive. The letter, which was read out loud in court, said that the country was no longer what it should be and how the time was right for a revolution. It said he wanted to be buried in a wooden coffin and not a lead-lined one, so that his remains could return to where they came from. It said he tried to do what he did without being ID'd, but that if his parents were to ever read the letter, then his efforts to not be identified would have failed. I do not have a death wish, it said. I tried to do this in a way as to not get caught. It said that he may return one day, and it thanked his parents for being good parents and asked them to forgive him for not being a good son. And then, Trooper Alex Douglas limped up to the stand. He described his injuries and how he has to use a colostomy bag. He said the pain he has in his rectum is constant and that it feels like a twisting, serrated knife. He said he suffers incontinence and can't control his muscles. He has no feeling below one knee, and he has to wear a brace, or else his ankle will collapse and he'll fall when he walks. He said he's unable to sit for more than 15 minutes without needing a pain pill, and said he'll likely have to undergo additional surgeries on top of the 18 he's already had. Douglas recounted for the jury what happened the night of the attack, how he was in the parking lot when he heard the loud bangs and saw Corporal Dixon lying on the ground, how he tried to yell for help before attempting to drag him to safety, how he too was then hit by a bullet. He said, "It felt like getting hit in my lower back with a baseball bat. I dropped to my knees." He told the jury how he managed to get inside the building before collapsing. He said he couldn't feel his legs, that his body was warm. "I was sweating profusely. I was losing breath. I felt paralyzed. The pain hadn't set in yet." He said he knew that someone, a coward or cowards, he said, was shooting at them from the woods across the street. He described how his fellow troopers pulled him to safety and how he was in the worst pain you can imagine, like your whole body being on fire. He said he was put on a stretcher and taken by ambulance to a waiting helicopter that then airlifted him to the Community Medical Center trauma unit in Scranton. He said the doctors asked him what happened, and before he knew it, he was out like a light. After the emergency surgery to stop the bleeding, he said he was put into a medically induced coma for about a week while he was hooked up to a ventilator. Doctors put the colostomy bag in and put titanium in his femur, along with a metal plate in his hip. He said he spent the next month in the intensive care unit, and then he was transferred to the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York City. He was experiencing constant bioleakage and needed a spacer installed in his hip that dripped antibiotics in order to stop an infection. He said he was in so much pain that he couldn't lie on his back long enough for a CAT scan or an X-ray. He said he went through intensive physical therapy for months, and he had to learn how to do simple things all over again. Douglas broke down on the stand and asked for tissue while he recounted his trauma. He said he used to run marathons and used to work out every day. He said he went from 180 pounds of muscle to 145 pounds while he was in the hospital. Dr. Gary Ross, the forensic pathologist who conducted the autopsy on Corporal Dixon, testified that either of the 2 bullet wounds alone were fatal. After 10 days of presenting evidence and calling 53 witnesses to the stand, the prosecution rested. The defense then rested too, without presenting any evidence or calling any witnesses to the stand. In his closing arguments, District Attorney Raymond Tonkin called Eric a terrorist with murder in his heart, a plan in his mind, and a rifle in his hands. "This murdering terrorist now sits before you, right over there," he said, pointing to Eric over at the defense table. He then methodically reiterated the evidence that they presented against him, and again played the surveillance video of the attack and the aftermath, and once again displayed the autopsy photos of Corporal Dixon. He said one of the more chilling aspects of this case was the fact that Eric shot Dixon and then waited 90 seconds before shooting Trooper Douglas. He recalled Eric's own words in his writings when he spoke about wanting to kill police officers in order to spark a revolution. He said, "It's the words written in private moments that will show you who someone is. We do not change government here in America with bullets. We change it with votes. He decided to change it with bombs and bullets. That's terrorism." Eric's attorney, Michael Weinstein, spoke in his closing arguments for about 10 minutes, only slightly longer than his opening statements. He called it a tragedy of monumental proportions that affected 2 families, the state police, and an entire county. But, he said, presumption of innocence and reasonable doubt are 2 great pillars of our American justice system. But then he said, "I certainly acknowledge that the mountain of evidence that you saw points to my client, Eric Frein. It's up to you, the jury, to determine if the prosecution has removed that presumption of innocence behind a reasonable doubt." The jury of 8 women and 4 men deliberated for 3 hours and 49 minutes before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. This was the first of 2 verdicts in this case. With the guilty verdict, the case would now enter the penalty phase, where the jury would ultimately have to decide whether to sentence Eric to death or life in prison with no chance of parole. The DA had listed several aggravating factors, which are essentially details that elevate a murder to a capital case. In this case, the aggravating factors were that Corporal Dixon was murdered in the line of duty and that Eric had endangered others and put them at risk for death when he opened fire at the barracks. The defense in this phase would try to prove that there are mitigating factors or details regarding Eric or the circumstances of the crime that may result in a lighter sentence. These will oftentimes include character witnesses, family members, and mental health experts. These witnesses can show that a defendant may have had an extreme or mental disturbance when he committed the crime. Eric's defense would be presenting 2 mitigating factors: the fact that Eric had no significant criminal history, and then other evidence of his character and circumstances of the crime. It's also interesting to note that with a death penalty case such as this, everything is tipped in the defense's favor. Prosecutors must prove each aggravating factor beyond a reasonable doubt, whereas the defense must only prove their mitigating factors by a preponderance of the evidence. In order for a death sentence to be imposed, the jurors have to unanimously agree that the aggravating factors outweigh the mitigating factors. And if they can't make that determination, Eric would automatically be sentenced to life without parole. The prosecution brought Tiffany Dixon, Corporal Dixon's wife, to the stand first. With photos of her husband on the screen while she testified, Tiffany Dixon said that there is no more Tiffany Dixon, that she's the widow. She said everyone loves that word, widow. She said her husband was a great teammate and a devoted father to their 2 sons, ages 5 and 7, when their father was murdered. She told the jury how she first learned about her husband's death. At 11:40 p.m. on the night of the killing, there was a knock at her door. She said she thought it was her husband, but it was 2 state troopers and a priest. They informed her that there was a problem at the barracks and that her husband had been killed. She talked about how she had to tell her sons that their father was dead. She said her older son had to be heavily medicated due to his grief. She was sobbing as she testified, saying, "He's so angry, he's so sad. He can't eat, he can't sleep. He screams that he wants to die. He wants to die to be with Daddy." Tiffany said she has a lot of friends and family including the state police, who have supported her, but that at home, she's overwhelmed without her husband. She said, "I don't get to grow old with him." One of Corporal Dixon's best friends, Sergeant Derek Felsman, took the stand. He was the officer who put Dixon's handcuffs on Eric when he was arrested. He recalled how they had first met and how they quickly became friends. He said he protected the Dixon family during the manhunt and that he gave the eulogy at his funeral. He said, "We lost one of the best public servants. His absence is monumental." Corporal Dixon's sister, along with his mother, also testified. His mother talked about watching her son turn into a man and said, "I do not hate Eric Frein, but that doesn't mean I don't hold him responsible." She said she forgives him. When it was time for the defense to present their witnesses, they asked the judge to allow Eric to be sent for a psychiatric evaluation. They said Eric had been put on suicide watch recently and that he had been acting strangely. Eric showed up to court in a wheelchair, looking disheveled and off, and he was refusing to talk to his lawyers. His attorney, Michael Weinstein, told the court Eric would not walk or talk this morning while in prison. He was not communicating with anyone and is just staring off into space. Prosecutors objected and played a phone conversation that Eric had had with his mother from jail just a few days earlier. In the phone call, Eric tells his mom that he hasn't been able to sleep and that no one knows why he was put on psychiatric watch. He said that he was not happy that his attorney wasn't cross-examining anyone, saying, "Mike didn't question anything. I hate to say it, but I wish DA Tonkin was the defense lawyer. But they kept saying, no question, when there are so many questions." DA Tonkin said that he believes the phone call demonstrated that Eric knows what's going on with his case and that this was Eric trying to delay the proceedings. The judge agreed, and the defense started calling their witnesses. They called an expert on prison life, who testified that people who are sentenced to life in prison are not as dangerous as people think they are. They tend to settle into life and try to get through the day and just do their own time. He said he interviewed Eric, who told him that self-control is easy inside prison. Several friends and family members also testified on Eric's behalf. His father said that he lied about his military service in Vietnam and used to tell his son false combat stories while he was a sniper. He said, "I failed him as a father. I didn't push him hard enough." Eric's mom also testified and said that she doesn't want her son on death row. "How do you go on with your life?" she asked. Eric was noticeably crying while his mom was on the stand. Eric's adopted younger sister, Tiffany, testified that their parents were abusive and that Eric was always her protector. She said her father would grab her by the hair and throw her down on the floor, and that he even once broke down her door and punched her in the face 7 times. She said Eric would stand up for her to their parents, and that he made her feel like someone actually loved her. Eric's half-sister, Ellen, also testified. She said she hadn't spoken to Eric in years before seeing him on the news. She said she did still speak to their father, however, who she said would call her whenever he was drunk and tell her that he wanted to kill people. He had a rage inside of him and wanted to kill people, she said. After the defense rested, the prosecution played a jailhouse conversation from when his mother came to visit him, weeks after he was arrested. In the recording, the two laughed about how reporters were trying to get interviews. Eric said that after the trial, his first interview would go to the highest bidder. After a few hours of deliberations, all 12 jurors unanimously ruled in favor of the death penalty. At his sentencing, the judge formally sentenced him to death and said, "It's the hope of the court that the story of Eric Frein ends today." Eric's case will be automatically appealed, given that it's a death penalty case. But in 2015, the governor of Pennsylvania placed a moratorium on executions. Brian K. Dixon was born on December 24, 1975, in Minot, North Dakota. He enlisted in the Pennsylvania State Police in June 2007, and in June 2014, he transferred to Blooming Grove. Corporal Dixon had a passion for DUI enforcement, earning numerous awards from the department and the Pennsylvania DUI Association. During his career, he became one of only a small number of troopers certified as a drug recognition expert to further his skills in DUI enforcement. Corporal Dixon served honorably as both a Pennsylvania State Trooper and a United States Marine. He was buried with full honors in Dunmore, Pennsylvania on September 18, 2014. He is survived by his wife, Tiffany, and their 2 sons. Brian K. Dixon's end of watch was on September 12, 2014, but his legacy will live on. And that's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening.